I love the head shake at the end. Ain't gonna worry about this dude. And so I'm thinking through this message, the new series, the summer series, and the picture that came to mind was of this, of you holding a big bowl, right? And so if I got you a large bowl and I said, fill it up, and you grabbed some water and you filled it up, the goal was to fill it up to the very, very tippy top. Then, of course, immediately what would happen is you would be realizing, oh my gosh, it's so full, like I got to be careful not to spill it. And so you would be careful to not spill it. You would be holding it tight, you would be balancing, you're figuring out, you don't want to spill it. And then some punk comes along and gives you a shoulder. Bam! Jostles you, knocks you into you a little bit, and you're like, oh my God, what? You spill a little bit and you're trying to protect it, and so this is what ends up happening for many of us, is that we're getting jostled in this life, and we're trying to figure out how in the world can we keep the stuff from spilling out, because when you get jostled and somebody walks up and gives you an elbow or shoves a shoulder into your back, and all of a sudden you start to see the stuff inside kind of flow out around you, get spilled all around you. You start to wonder, oh my God, I gotta try to keep this in. What am I doing? Creates a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, a lot of questions start to come to your own mind. What can I do? I got to work harder. Maybe I should try to figure out a way to cover it up, contain it, and pack it in real tight, make it so it's not so easy to spill out. And that is certainly one way to go. It's also an exhausting way to go when you're talking about people jostling you. Because you have to stop and ask, what happens when I get jostled? What overflows the bounds of my life when somebody throws a shoulder at me? What comes out? Do I want to kill him? When somebody walks up and interrupts your well-crafted, scripted day, and they interrupt you and they take away from your plan, are you like, hey, do you have a watch? Do you have a calendar? Because there's a way to honor time and people, and that's not it. You don't interrupt someone and steal my time from me in my way. Maybe you are wondering about your relationships at home. And when you see that your spouse isn't giving you the appropriate kind of attention, she's jostled you in that way, given a little shoulder shove, what comes out? What happens? Where do your thoughts start to go? Where does your mind run to? You're at the office and your boss publicly disrespects you in front of the team. What comes out? What wells up inside of you? You've been jostled by some punk. He threw a hard shoulder, and all of a sudden, there's all of this stuff coming out. Try to pack it in. Good luck. Here's the thing. You think you're packing it in, right? You actually think you're hiding it. And really what you're doing is you're hiding it in the sense that from yourself. Because anyone who knows you for 5 minutes actually sees it starting to leak out over the edges. You're hiding it from yourself. What's coming out when you get jostled? Because you could try really, really, really hard. You could be really, really committed. You could say, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to work really hard to make sure this stuff in me doesn't come out. That's one way to go. It's exhausting. It's exhausting. It wears you down. And you're not nearly as good at it as you think you are. The other way to go, of course, is to make sure what comes out is great to spill. If you'd filled that up with love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, kindness, gentleness, and self-control. I mean, if we filled your bowl up with diamonds, you would have more friends than you could possibly imagine. They would be following you around, sticking bricks in your path, throwing elbows, because all you just spilling. Everywhere you spill, outpours these amazing kinds of things. What if instead you were filled up with compliments and words of encouragement? What if every time you got jostled, the people around you got blessed? when you overflowed the bounds? What happens if every single time something happened and it welled up inside of you and broke over the bounds and spilled out into the world, people found just a little bit of hope? What if you were overflowing with forgiveness? Imagine that every single time something welled up, someone threw a shoulder at you, forgiveness poured out. See, you could try really, really hard to keep all of the stuff in, or you could just not worry so much about what spills out, because when it spills out, it creates beauty in this world. You see, that to me feels like a much more powerful, productive, less anxious way to live. Imagine a life that when it gets jostled, joy and laughter come out. Think about your journey with Christ when it began. Go back to the early days. Some of you here aren't yet followers of Jesus. You're checking things out. You're trying to figure it out. And we hope that today is a great part of that journey in helping you take a step forward. But we also know that a lot of you here have some form of Christianity in your background. Today you'd say, I'm a Christian. So go back to the day when you became a Christian, the season of life where you first started with this awareness. For some of you, it was crazy. It was transformative. You accepted Christ and everything shifted. Everything changed. All of a sudden you're like, bam, like everything is in Technicolor suddenly. And maybe it kind of trailed off from that point, or maybe it didn't. Maybe it kind of held steady for you. Others had a very different experience. You sort of came to faith in Jesus and like nothing happened. The next day was exactly the same as the day before. And you were like, well, that little anticlimactic. I was kind of hoping there would be like fireworks or something like that. Like it would be like, wow, this was cool. But then little by slowly, day by day, month by month, all of a sudden you look back on your life and you go, I'm a completely different person. The whole of my life has changed. Something has shifted. And so maybe it starts out a little bit slow for you, but it builds to a good head of steam, and it's just cranking now. And that's a great thing. It's a great place to be. Some of you, though, you actually entered Christianity because it's what your family did. And so you've been a Christian your whole life, whatever that even means to you, and you just do it because they've told you it's what we do. Like, we're a Christian family. Stop it. Don't think of anything else. You got to be a Christian because that's what we do. We're a Christian. We've been Christians since the apostles came over to, our part of the world. Like, that's what happened. Like, come on, let's just do that. But you've never actually said, am I really? Like, I mean, you've wondered, questioned, but you haven't really actually said, this is for me. Or maybe you've said it for me, but it's just sort of there. It's sort of just a part of your background story. So maybe, you're at that place today and you're thinking, things between me and God, they're fine. They're okay. I mean, my prayer life is a little erratic. When I pray, it's mostly out of desperation. I try to throw a good word once in a while up there. My Bible reading, I do it because, I've been told my whole life I'm supposed to. Maybe that's kind of where you might be at today. There's nothing wrong with this. There's nothing wrong with you saying, you know what, I'm trying to read, I'm trying to understand. There's nothing wrong with that being a season of your life and kind of what's going on with you at, this time. Maybe you get a little bit surprised, even to this day, that when you get jostled, stuff comes out that you're not a big fan of. Maybe you're like, it's still coming out. This is still who I am. I thought maybe I'd be further along by now. Maybe you're still finding that you're getting judgmental when the people around you aren't living up to your standards. Or maybe you're feeling a little bit jealous when others are doing better than you. Or maybe, you're getting pouty because your wife doesn't let her world revolve around you. Or maybe you're whatever it is. And you're looking at this stuff and you're like, I don't know, I kind of felt like this is who I wanted to be was going to be something different, and I'm not really there. Like, what is this? What's happened? How come I'm kind of just here? So you might think to yourself, all right, well, here's who I want to be and here's who I still am, and so I got to figure out how to close the gap. And so what we usually do, and what a lot of Christian churches do, and what we encourage us to do, and in so many subtle and very not so subtle ways, is we say, you got to close this gap, which means you got to work really, really hard to do it. You got to work hard. You got to figure out how to close the gap. Here's who you're supposed to be. This is what a really good Christian would do, and this is who you are today. You see the distance? Because we do. So we use a little bit of guilt, a little bit of shame, a little bit of pressure to say, I think you just need to work a little bit harder. You have a spouse maybe who's pointing it out a lot. Hey, you really sort of are not the one that you should be, or that I need you to be, or that the kids need you to be. I just kind of think you should step up your game just a little bit. So you try a little harder. And that hard work leads to fatigue. Fatigue breeds this exhaustion. Exhaustion leads you to quit. Quitting produces guilt and shame. Guilt and shame makes you run from God. The very effort of trying to do better leads you further away from where you actually wanted to be. This is the trick that the enemy will continually do on all of us. In fact, the whole of the world religions continue to teach this exact thing. Work really, 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 really hard. Do exactly what we tell you to do. If you fail, you should have shame and guilt. And when you do good, you can sort of look down on the people around you that aren't doing quite so good. This is far from the picture that Jesus gives to us. The Bible tells us there's a better way. Time and again, in 1,000 different ways, the Bible assures us that there is a better way. The whole of your life, you could think of the whole of your Christian experience, the decision that you make to follow Jesus, whether you've never made that and you make that decision right here today for the very first time, or you made it, 10 years ago when you were in youth group, or maybe you made it, when you don't even remember because you were a kid in Sunday school, at Vacation Bible School. Whenever it happened, when you decided to follow Jesus, the promise of the scriptures is that your whole life will change. Your whole life will change. This is something I don't know. Again, we're at Christianity 101 here for just a minute, but I want to spend some time just reflecting on this because I'm not really sure we let some of these very familiar truths sink in to the part where they're really genuinely transformative in our lives. And so a guy named Nicodemus, a priest of the priests, he's a teacher of the teachers. He comes up to Jesus and he says, Jesus, I know that you're a man from God. This is a good moment. Jesus is making some inroads in with the priests, and this is like a good thing for him to be recognized. This is a good thing for Nicodemus. This is like good. You should look at this story and be like, Nicodemus, you're the man. You did it. You saw it. What other people missed, that Jesus is the one that you need to be taken serious. Nicodemus, you got it. And so you would expect Jesus, what I would do, if you came up to me and said, Robert, I could tell that you're a man from God and you do great things. You're like my new best friend. I'm like, you are a wise and beautiful person. This is like what I would do because it's like, I'm so glad you saw what I realized. Jesus, he nearly picks a fight with this guy, one of the leaders of the leaders, the priests of the priests. He picks a fight nearly. He's like, Jesus replied, I tell you the truth. He's talking to Nicodemus, all right? And he says, unless you're born again, you can't see the kingdom of God. When you read the context, you find out quickly. Nicodemus knew exactly what Jesus was saying. Jesus was saying, hey, Nicodemus, you think you're hot stuff? You think you noticed? You think you see? You're not even going into the kingdom of God. You, Nicodemus, need to be reborn. You need to become something brand new. Nicodemus literally, actually in the story, he's like, how can this be? Because what he's really thinking is, if you're telling me I need this, the rest of these people are in deep trouble. Deep trouble. A teacher. Followed the law like no one's business. Probably had memorized most, if not all, of the Old Testament. Like, this guy was a stud in his day. Jesus is like, yeah, no, not working for you. You get the same sort of an idea later on in Paul in a slightly different way. He says, this is in 2 Corinthians, it says, this means that anyone who belongs to Christ has become a new person. The old life is gone and a new life has begun. Now, some of you are like, these are all familiar. I heard this back in Sunday school. Yes, we hear this back in Sunday school, Christianity 101. But I just want us to pause and reflect on this for just a moment because here's the thing. Everything changes. Everything. The whole of our lives are being changed. We are being born, created with a new heart. We become new people. Old life is gone. New life has begun. It isn't completed yet, but it has begun. We are going to increasingly become new people. The whole life changes. That means your values, why you do what you do, even if the actions and the behaviors are exactly the same, the values change behind them. Your purpose, your meaning in life, why you get up in the morning, it's new. It is changed. There is a transformation that takes place in the genuine Christian's heart that is all-consuming. It takes over every sphere of your life. It invades every nook and cranny, everything in the darkness. It brings to the new light that is found in the power and the love that Jesus brought to us. Everything changes. How we act, how we think, the relationships that we form, how we dress, what we eat, what we drink, why we do those things. The amount of time we spend on things, the entertainments that we enjoy, the jokes that we laugh at, something that we think is just visceral and just naturally just flows out of us, the very jokes that we laugh at change. The things that break our hearts, how compassion wells up in us, how we spend our money, how we make our money, everything changes. The whole life, values, thoughts, purpose, meaning, identity, everything changes. How is it that we get to experience more and more of this life without falling into the trap of simply trying to do it harder, work more? See, if I say these things to you, you could immediately turn around and go, but that's not my experience. That's not who I am. That's not how I'm living this life. It's exhausting me. I'm trying to be a new person, and it's just kicking my butt. I'm tired. How do we increasingly see that the new life has begun, see it come to fruition, increasingly become real of us? How do we do it without simply falling into the trap of all of the world religions and every other self-help book and habits-forming book that you could possibly want to read? How in the world can we do it in such a way that still is in line with the values the Scriptures give to us? And we're told this. This is Christianity 102. Christianity 102 tells us from the book of John. This is Jesus, one of his famous speeches. He says, I am the true grapevine. This is Jesus talking. And my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch of mine that doesn't produce fruit. And he prunes the branches that do bear fruit so that they will produce even more. You have already been pruned and purified by the message I have given you. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. Jesus is saying, listen, you want to know how this is going to happen? God is going to do the heavy lifting. He's going to do the hard work. Guess what you're going to do? You're going to remain. You're going to rest. You're going to abide. You're going to remain in me. Your job is to stay connected to the vine. For a branch cannot produce fruit if it is severed from the vine. You cannot be fruitful unless you remain in me. Yes, I am the vine. You are the branches. Those who remain in me and I in them will produce much fruit. You want to know how we produce much fruit? Work really, 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 really hard. Beat ourselves up. You remain in him. He produces the fruit through you. He's the source. He has the life. He has the energy. He has the nutrients. Your job, stay in him. Remain in him. And let him flow through you in all of these incredibly productive ways. Anyone who doesn't remain in me is thrown away like a useless branch and withers. Such branches are gathered into a pile to be burned. He warns us that the life apart from him is dry and brittle and useless. Not even good for fuel. Remain in me, I will remain in you. Those who remain in me and I in them will produce much fruit, for apart from me, you can do nothing. Sometimes we're so busy. We're doing all this stuff. We're trying really, really hard. We're trying to be productive. We're trying to produce. And in the end, Jesus is saying, if you're doing all of that stuff apart from me, it's nothing. It amounts to nothing. It won't last past the final purge. It won't last the transition from here to the heavenly life. It won't last. It won't matter. It won't extend into eternity. You will have been invested in all of the temporal things that don't really matter. I'm telling you, apart from me, you can do nothing. If you don't remain in me, this is the futility that you're experiencing. This is the frustration that nags at the soul. He's saying, it doesn't matter if you're doing it without me. It's nothing. People think this is a harsh kind of a word he's giving. He's telling us the reality of how the universe that God created works. He's calling us into something unbelievably life-giving. So how do we actually remain in the vine? What does this actually look like? See, this new life, it will grow more and more rewarding, more and more powerful, more and more productive as we learn how to eliminate the barrier between us and him. And this is this is kind of an interesting kind of a thought, I think, that I have been reflecting on a lot lately. I've been sharing some things with the staff about it because it's really been kind of kicking around in my soul. This is how, imagine this is your life, right? Nice, square, big box. Everything about your life is contained in this box, right? This is the life you live every day. You wake up, go to school, you go to work, you do your thing, you have your relationships, you have your dog, you have your hobbies, all of your life, everything you do, everything you see, taste, touch, smell, all of that stuff around you every single day, that is your life, all right? And now, I'm calling this a state, this is bewilderment. You're like, well, my life isn't really bewildering. I mean, it's just a little confusing sometimes, but bewilderment. And here's why, because it seems to me that people who live with an understanding that everything they see, taste, smell, the material world around them is the whole of their life, if you get further along in that journey and you start accomplishing some big things and you start padding your savings, your checking account, you start collecting a whole lot of toys that this world offers, and all of a sudden you feel like, how come I'm not happy? Like I did everything that I was supposed to do, that they told me I was supposed to do. I worked real hard. I got into a good school. I got a decent job. I got the wife. I got the 1.8 kids or whatever that's supposed to be. I got the dog. I even got a cat for good measure, trying to be a good person. And so I did all of these things, and I should be happy. I should be content. I should be satisfied. And so there's a state of bewilderment, I think, that happens for those that really do experience this and really actually are open. If you're not medicating yourself, right? If you're not entertaining yourself into oblivion, if you're not swiping away, your life, if you're actually trying to experience it and feel it and think through it, if you're doing those things, at some point you go, I'm not really sure I'm loving this. I'm not really sure this is like great. I'm not really sure this is awesome. And all of a sudden, this is a state of bewilderment. Bewilderment. We see this in the scriptures in a whole lot of different ways. So then, one day you might come across the truth in the world that there is another life besides this life. It's the unseen world. It's a spirit life. Now, a whole lot of people, when they hit bewilderment stage, they really start to wrestle with it. They start looking for something, right? So they go check out this yogi, and they go read that book, and they try this self-help thing, and they throw themselves into a marathon, and that worked, so now an ultra marathon, and now it's nutrition, and it's health, and it's this, or it's that, it's the other thing. It's a relationship. For some people, it's like there's something transcendent when I'm in a relationship, and when I feel so deeply loved, and then that person ultimately disappoints you, and you're like, you were from Satan, but there's another person out there, and that one's going to really bring me to enlightenment. And so we do all of these different forms of this kind of a thing, right? And so we start looking. Now, if you were fortunate enough to realize that Christian spirituality, that following Jesus is actually the doorway, then you do it. You take it. You walk through that door, and you are born again. You're given the new life, and all of a sudden it opens up this whole other dimension of life, which is pretty darn amazing. Now, I call this stage vacillation, because here's what we generally do when we start to live in this way. What we do is we say, all right, here's my regular kind of like my work life, right? I got this thing going, and it's good. So I'm down here in my work life. This is pretty cool. But in the morning, I try to spend a little bit of time, with Jesus. And so we encourage you, have your devotional time, have a prayer time, read the Bible, right? And you're like, so I do that. And then, you go after work, you hang out with your friends, and you live your real life, what feels like your real life, and you do these kind of things, and you fill up your life. And then every once in a while, you drop back in. And so you vacillate between these two worlds. If how often people will say, hey, it's Sunday morning, I got to go to church because, I need like a big boost, because I got to make it through the week, right? And so we spend some time in the Jesus thing, and then maybe it's been a rough couple of weeks. I got a tough relationship. I got a boss who's kind of a jerk, and no one at Beacon says that, but they, not to me. Anyway, so you have these moments, right? And we vacillate between them. And this is good. This is, Christianity 102, 103. Like this is basic, the way that this is how we start kids. This is what we tell them in Sunday school class as well, right? And so this vacillating state will often hold people for a long time. Sometimes it's as far as people get. And that's really a bit unfortunate, because you really could start thinking about a stage that we talk about as called integration, right? And so integration is looking for a way to start to perforate the realm here. It's starting to say, wait a second, there's actually something going on here that is different. There's a way that I can bring the spirit life into my other life. And so my prayers now start to become about things and people in my real life. So I have a big meeting, I have a big relationship, and that relationship is really important to me. And so now I'm going to find time, I'm going to bring these moments of integration into my life. I'm going to pray about these things, and I'm going to see if there's some way that the spirit life will actually impact this life. There are even moments in this where this life punctures this life in a very weird way, where you're like, suddenly, you're in that moment and you're doing your thing and you're going about your work, job, life, whatever it is, and someone jostles you and you feel this moment where you're like, wow, like I just felt the spirit of peace. Or you're walking down the street and all of a sudden you hear something and you don't know what it is. You're like, what was that? Like, who's talking to me? And you're like, oh, no one's here. No one's talking. I'm talking to myself now. This is awkward. I'm talking to myself. And you're like, wait, no, there's something going on. I'm hearing something. It feels like what I hear sometimes in my prayers. And all of a sudden you're like, wait, I think this is God telling me something. Like, I think he wants me to do that. And then all of a sudden you notice the thing that he wants you to do, the person he wants, who that he brought to your attention, the person in need that he wants you to spill a little bit of your love on. And you're like, that was the coolest experience. Like this world intruded in the spirit world and they kind of met in this moment. And I'm like, this is really cool. Like there's an integration and you are becoming a more genuine and more authentic follower of Jesus because you're seeing that these two realms are the whole of your life. This is the whole of your life now, and this is becoming increasingly real, and it's starting to take some territory. It's starting to expand into other areas, and it's starting to impact what's going on. And now, when you get to this stage, this is where things start to look a little bit more technicolor, and you live in this way with Jesus, and all of a sudden you're like, this is pretty awesome. Like, I'm feeling pretty pumped about my experience with Jesus. And all of a sudden, the things in this world start to look different. They start to dim in comparison to the things in that world. And all of a sudden, you realize, no, all of these are together, and it's integrated in a way that is bringing real joy and satisfaction and settledness and peace. And I'm telling you, there are a whole lot of saints who have been in the faith a very long time, and they will tell you this is their normal experience. They will tell you that throughout their day, throughout their week, throughout their month, that there is an integration between these two worlds. And then there are a number of saints, mostly some who have been in the faith a long time, and others who just, this is the way they kind of cut their teeth in faith, and they start to realize, wait a second, there's a lot less separating us in these realms than maybe I had ever been told. This barrier is not a real barrier. It's a self-imposed barrier. It's a barrier that in some ways I actually liked for a long time. I wanted it there because if Jesus is going to start getting involved in every area of my life, it means he knows what I'm looking at on the internet. He knows my thoughts. He knows my, the secrets, little things in my heart. He knows that I'm still nursing that little grudge that I had against that person. Like, I'm not really sure I want him in all of this life. That's a little bit too intrusive for me. And so we're actually pretty comfortable with the barrier. Because now here's a little pro tip, by the way. Jesus already knows those things. Just in case you are wondering, he actually already knows. Trying to keep him confined from getting into this little nook and cranny of your life isn't really going omniscient, knowing all things and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, big theology. Christian, we'll talk about that another day. But the point is, he already knows all this. And so it's kind of foolish for us to actually be trying to hide it and not really think through that in a clear way. And so the great saints of old, and many of us here would tell you that our increasing experience and even goal is to begin to see a type of what, instead of all, in this story of integration, I call this, instead, let's call this simultaneity. There is a type of flow that goes like this. There's a type of persistence where the flow from one realm into the next realm and back into the other realm, that the barriers start to break. And you read the scriptures and you realize this is what he was talking about when he said, remain in me. A moment by moment experience of the very presence of God in your life. You can be going about your regular business, going about your day-to-day, going about the things that are important and that you must do. And all the while you're doing those things, God is breaking through. You are connecting. You're spending ever more real moments in his presence. Right? The scriptures tell us to pray without ceasing. And we're like, I can't really pray without ceasing. That's kind of intense. Like, I'm going to be on my knees for how many hours? I'm going to be... You can't pray without ceasing in the same way you have your morning devotional time. It doesn't make any sense. You wouldn't do anything. You wouldn't actually get out and live and eat and make friends, and you wouldn't do it. You can't pray without ceasing in that way, but it means something. What does it mean? It means this. It means simultaneity. It means that you will pray without ceasing. It means you will continually be in communication with the Spirit. Another way of saying that is you will remain in him. You'll abide in him. You'll stay connected to the vine. You'll pray without ceasing. And suddenly you start to see and you go, wait, it's all over the scriptures. It's all over the place. You watch the life of Jesus, and all of a sudden he says he knew power flew out from him. Something happened. He goes to prayer, he comes back, he knows what he's supposed to do next. There is a moment-by-moment experience that you can cultivate. You can have it. It isn't even supposed to be Christianity 401. It was supposed to be the normal Christian experience. It was supposed to be a life of surrender, a life where we look to Jesus and we go, my goodness, this is what he had intended all along. To be able to walk with God in the cool of the garden in relationship. We have a personal relationship. Now think about it all. All of the language that you've heard all over these years, you're going to start to see the connection. A personal relationship. Guess what? That means it's always there. You have a relationship between you and the Father, and you don't have to check in with him. He is always there. He is ever present, and he is inviting you into it. He's calling you into it. He's saying, this is who you were meant to be. This is how you were meant to live. You don't have to live in this vacillating state between these realms. You've created the barrier. And he says, I came on the scene, I tore the veil in two. I gave you access to the Holy of Holies, a place that Nicodemus never could have gone to before the sacrifice of Christ on the cross. And you say, yeah, but when I mess up, I feel shame and guilt and sin. And he's like, yeah, you do. And all of the wrath of God towards sin and toward the injustices in this world, all of that wrath that God has stored up for all of that evil, it was poured out on Jesus at the cross. Not you. He's giving you his righteousness. He's giving you status as a child of God. That's what he has for you. That's his gift. Yeah, but I feel guilt and I feel shame. All of that has been dealt with at the cross. Yeah, but I've done wrong. Yes. And Jesus knows it. And guess how many of your sins that he died for before you committed them? All of them. He knew. He's offering it up as a free gift, as grace. All of the world religions, all of our own secular philosophies, they all teach you that you have to work really, really hard and do better, and then you should kind of beat yourself up just a little bit. Use shame, guilt, use it to motivate you. And Jesus is like, I'm not going to shame and guilt any of you. You have the righteousness of Christ. You are a prince and a princess in the royal court of the King of the universe, and he adores you. And he invites you to come in and be a part, be with a family, be in communication, moment by moment, simultaneity, to walk with Jesus, to walk in the Spirit, to come back to him time and again, connected. Here's a simple way to do it. If you want to start conditioning your mind, conditioning your soul, here's your assignment for the next week. Take a prayer. I call them a gospel mantra. Pick it, make it fit for you, make it fit for your situation, make it fit for where your soul is right now with God. Maybe you're feeling far from God, and maybe your mantra is draw near Jesus. That's it. Maybe you pick that. Maybe for you, you've said, I haven't really surrendered my whole life to him. I'm kind of comfortable with this whole barrier thing. I don't like him meddling in my life. And so maybe for you, it's your will be done. Those are famous words, right? Your will be done on earth as in heaven. Maybe you're asking God to come and break from the heavenly realm, the spirit realm, into the earthly realm. And maybe your prayer every moment of every single day can be, your will be done. Find your gospel mantra. Settle it every day, whatever it might be. Change it if you want to. Stick with the same one for the whole of the week. And then throughout the day, no matter what you're doing, bring that prayer back to mind. Going about your conversations, it comes to mind, thy will be done. Let's say you do it once every hour. Once every 2 hours. Maybe you forget for 4 hours, and then you're like, oh, I can't go back now. I forgot to even check in with God for 4 hours. Who am I? I'm such a terrible Christian. That's the enemy talking. What you do in that moment is you come back and you say, thy will be done. Thank you for being close. Thank you for being near. You're going about your day, you're having your conversations, you're in your relationships, you're doing your work, and it comes to mind, train your mind to remain in him. Thy will be done. Make it simple. Repeat it 10,000 times. Train the mind, train the soul to keep this ongoing conversation with your Heavenly Father. To turn to Jesus time and again. Maybe you're feeling beaten up. For you, it's thank you for your forgiveness. Thank you for grace. Thank you for loving me. A little bit of gratitude in a life that might right now not feel very full of thanks. Find your mantra, your gospel-focused mantra, over and over and over again. Use it this day, use it this week. And as soon as you forget to do it, get rid of the shame and guilt and come right back. Deal? Deal? All right, let me pray. Father, simultaneity, the idea that we can walk with you moment by moment, day by day, in the cool of the garden. This whole dream that you have for us. Lord, you have told us this is what you want. This is the basics of our faith. We're here over the summer, we're talking about, Lord, what it means to become more and more like Jesus, to look more and more like the original. And Lord, here we have this perfect example, the Father, the Son in perfect communion. Walking together, knowing each other's heart, knowing the will, feeling the love. Lord, that's what we want. We reject the lies that the enemy tells us. We embrace more fully and completely the wholeness, the perfect love that you have. We know, Lord, that your wrath and anger at our sin and injustice here in our lives and in the world, Lord, it's been exhausted at the cross. Exhausted. And that now you've given us the righteousness of Christ because you've put our sin on the cross. And that now you invite us into a relationship. You call us, Lord, your children. You call us your friend. The whole of the Bible grasps that language. It pushes it to the bounds to try to help us explain with 100 metaphors, Lord, to remain in you, to wait in you, on you, to trust in you, to walk with you, to journey with you. Lord, I'm asking that you would stir up every heart here, no matter where they are at right now, here, today, in the next hours, in the next days, Father, that they would increasingly live in this state of simultaneity as they walk with you, Lord. That's what we want. Give each person their gospel mantra, remind them time and again, invite them ever in, let them see progress and experience glory in an increasing way. I'm praying, Father, this and so much more, because you are the Lord who promises to give us exceedingly abundantly more than we could ever hope or imagine. And we pray it in Christ's name. Amen.